Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be making the Sundress. The dress is inspired by the House of CB dresses that have been going absolutely viral on TikTok. Now, to make the dress, you are going to need to have knowledge in some of these topics: how to straight stitch, how to top stitch, how to work with rigid and boning, how to insert eyelets, how to stitch an invisible zipper with lining, and also how to overlock with and without a serger. And some of the special tools I will be using is the overcast foot to overlock without a serger, the invisible zipper foot, and also my eyelet pliers. So yeah, make sure you have these tools. Okay, for our materials, we are going to need our pattern, our tailor's chalk, some thread, an invisible zipper that's 20 centimeters long, your fabric. I'm using Korean organdy and some chiffon, boning, bra cups, which are optional. I ended up not using mine, and obviously your eyelets, which will be going to the back. Alrighty then, for step one, I am going to be cutting all my pattern pieces. Then I'm going to take my chiffon and line it with the Korean organdy. Then I'm going to be basting those pieces together. I want to do this to all the pieces. All I'm doing is just simply combining my chiffon with my Korean organdy because I want it to be a little bit thick and to have a little bit of structure. So after I've done that with all of my pieces, I am going to then move on to putting everything together. So I'm just trimming off the excess seam allowances. So now I'm going to start with my side top and my side bottom piece, and I'm going to put them together like that at the top and bottom seam. So basically what I want to do is I want to make sure that the side front piece is a whole piece, right? Because everything is into like little pieces. So I want to do that with the other side. So when I'm done putting my side front pieces together like that, I am going to go ahead and just grab onto my top center front and the lower center front or the bottom center front. I'm going to stitch them together right over them. So basically I'm repeating the same process that I did with the side front pieces. When I'm done with that, I'm just going to go ahead. I know I'm a bit out of frame, but what I did was I just trimmed off the excess seam allowance from the seams that I had stitched, and then I exchanged my foot, my sewing machine foot, and I inserted the overcast foot to overlock, right? So then I finished the raw edges of the seams that I had stitched. So I'm going to repeat this process for both my side front pieces and the center front piece. So as you can see over here, I'm just showing you guys an up close look as to what I'm doing. I'm just trimming off the excess seam allowance, and then I am going to go ahead and overcast everything. And remember, I am not using my overlocker. I wanted to show you guys that you can still have amazing and professional clothes without using an overlocker. All you need is to just get the overcast foot. So now I'm going to move on and do my back pieces. All I'm doing is taking my side back piece with my center back piece, and then I'm stitching them I'm putting them together at the seam. You have to also be mindful of the fact that when you do get your sewing pattern, it will be marked where those pieces are supposed. There will be a notch on the back pieces to show which seams go together. As you can see, I did not trim the excess seam allowance on that piece. That's because I'm going to be using it later to add some boning. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking my back piece and I'm putting it with my side front piece, and then I'm just going to stitch everything together, and I'm repeating the same process for the other side. And I'm not trimming off the excess seam allowance. I will finish the raw edges, but I will not trim off the excess seam allowance because of course I'm going to need it for my boning later on. I did not put the center front piece. I did not attach the center front piece yet. We will attach that later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my lining, which is the Korean organdy, and I'm just going to repeat the exact same process that I did for the front facing fabric, which is the chiffon, right? So do the same thing. Start with the side front pieces, do the center front piece, then do the back pieces, then go ahead and attach the back pieces to the side front pieces. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get ready to attach my boning. How I'm going to attach my boning is I'm going to first stitch it on to the seam allowance. Then I'm going to complete a top stitch on the right side of the fabric to secure the boning. So first I'm going to stitch it onto the seam allowance like that. And then before I stitch it, I'm actually going to calculate about half an inch from the top and the bottom of all the seam allowances where I'll be attaching the boning, because remember we are going to be stitching those the top and the bottom seam, right? So I'm going to mark that on all the places where I'm going to be attaching my boning. Then I'm going to cut my boning accordingly. So as you can see, I first stitch on the boning onto the seam allowance. Then I'm going to go from the front side of the fabric. So basically I'm lining the edge of my foot to the original seam where I have stitched, and this will give me a good gauge and a good balance for actually stitching the boning in place. So yeah, so basically just as a reminder, the process is we stitch the boning onto the seam allowance, then we go ahead and top stitch. So this is how your boning should be. It will be encased on the inside. Make sure that all of your seam allowances or your boning channels are all facing towards the back. So I'm going to take those pieces and put them to the side. Then I'm going to go ahead and work on my skirt. Now to work on my skirt, it's going to be super easy and quick. I'm just taking the two triangles and I'm putting them right sides together. Then I'm going to stitch that side seam. Now remember, when you're done with that, you want to overcast. You want to use your overcast foot, or you want to go ahead and just overlock your raw edge. And remember, what you're doing for the front facing fabric is exactly what you are going to do for your lining fabric. So now the next thing I'm going to do is at the waistline of the skirt pieces, I'm going to stitch 2 basting stitches. And how you do this is you just set your machine to the longest stitch that you have available, and then you set the tension to the lowest, and then you just stitch 2 stitches. Then what you're going to do is you're just going to pull from the bobbin side. You want to hold on to the bobbin thread and then just pull and create gathers. Remember, your gathers should, when you gather the skirt, the length of the skirt should match the where you are going to be attaching the skirt. So I'm going to be attaching the skirt to my side piece, right, to that front piece, and I'm going to make sure that my gathers are matching that waistline. Okay, as I'm pinning the piece together, so I have my top piece and my skirt piece, and I'm pinning them right sides together at the waistline, and I continue to just pull those gathers. I keep on gathering the skirt a little bit more to make sure that it's all lined up. Then I'm gonna go ahead and just stitch everything in place. And remember, guys, what I'm doing for this piece is exactly what I'm going to do for the other piece, and I'm going to repeat the same process for the lining fabric. The only difference with the lining fabric, which is the Korean organdy, is that I'm not going to be adding boning to it. That is the only way that it differs. Otherwise, I'm just going to be doing the exact same thing for all of my pieces. So now I have my piece over there. Then I'm just going to go ahead and just overcast, overlock, or serge, however you want to refer to it. And I'm going to repeat the same process for the lining, right? So I'm just going ahead and just using my overcast foot to just finish that raw edge. I did not trim off the excess seam allowance. If you want to trim the excess seam allowance off, then that's okay. However, I would recommend that you don't right now, because we're still going to do something to that seam later on where we attach the lining to it to make sure that it doesn't move around too much. So yeah, repeat the same process for your lining fabric. Okay, so now we have our side piece put together. We just need to attach the center front piece, right? So the dress is almost done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that when I put my center front piece, that seam needs to be lining up with all the seams, and all the notches all need to be lining up. If anything is out of place, it will look so unprofessional. So you want to make sure that you are lining up all of your notches. Seams that are supposed to go together need to be going together. So definitely take your time with this part. Make sure that you're lining up your notches and everything is perfect. So so basically what I'm doing is I'm just attaching the center front to the other dress, the other piece, right? I'm right sides together. Then I'm going to go ahead and just stitch. Now I did forget to overlock this part. Please do not forget this process. This is very, very important. Make sure that when you are done attaching the peak like this, you go ahead and just overlock it, serge it, or use an overcast foot, and then repeat the process for the other side of the dress, and then of course repeat the process for the lining. So as you can see, I'm trying to be very careful with lining up that seam, because like I said, if that seam is out of place even by a millimeter, it's going to look very unprofessional. And this is a very gorgeous dress, so you definitely want to make sure that it comes out looking super professional. Like I said, I forgot to overlock because I was getting a little carried away. Do not forget to overlock when you are done with this process. If you don't overlock it, it's not a train snatch, but I did have to go back and overlock the seam, especially the seam at the skirt, because the seam on the top I ended up using it to obviously make another boning channel. So basically all the dress pieces are put together at this point. And remember how we did our boning? That's exactly how we are going to do the boning over here, right? So we're first going to attach it to the seam allowance over there. Then we're going to fold over the piece, and then we are just going to stitch, right? I'm marking 1/2 inch only at the top, because the bottom seam, because we've attached the seam over there, we'll know exactly where to stop. So this is me attaching my boning. When I'm done attaching my boning, you guys know the drill. Fold it over like that, and then from the right side of my fabric, I'm just going to go ahead and line up the edge of my foot to just give me a good gauge of how thick I want my top stitch to be. And yeah, so now I have my front piece sewn together. Now I'm going to be attaching my lining. So to attach my lining, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to take the lining and I'm going to place it on top of the front facing fabric, which will be the chiffon. And then I have this twill tape. I think it's called twill tape, but basically it's the tape that they use to, when you want to hang your clothes and stuff like that. This is very important. So I'm putting that on the side seam. So where the side front and the side back piece combine, that seam, that is where I'm placing that twill tape. That's because I want to be able to hang my dress. So I know I didn't mention this in the things that you will be needing for the dress, because it's not compulsory. It doesn't do anything to the design of the dress. However, it does help when you want to hang the dress later on. So I did put the lining and the front facing fabric right sides together, pinned it at the top, and obviously I sandwiched my twill tape in the middle. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and just stitch that top seam together, right? So I don't want my dress to stretch a lot when I wear it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and trim. I'm going to go ahead and trim off the excess seam allowance over there. Yeah, so using the same twill tape that I used, I'm just going to go ahead and stitch it on the excess seam allowance that I have on that top seam. That's because I don't want that part to stretch, and I'm just using a zigzag stitch to stitch it in place. Again, I'm just stitching it onto the seam allowance. So from here I'm going to complete a top stitch or an edge stitch, or whatever you prefer to call it. But basically what I'm doing is I'm opening the dress, right, and then I'm pushing the seam allowance towards my lining piece, and then I'm going to stitch very close to the edge or the original seam that I had stitched. Assuming that you wanted to add bra cups to your dress, this is the time where you would add it. I did end up taking out mine, but what you're doing is you're just going to use your needle, and then you're just going to hand stitch them in place, making sure that you aren't piercing through the front of the fabric, and that you're just catching the, remember we did put our chiffon onto our Korean organdy, so you just want to be catching onto the Korean organdy while you're just stitching the cups in place. You just need a few stitches for that. I did end up taking out mine. So now I'm going to go ahead and add my invisible zipper. So I'm not going to be teaching you guys how to put in an invisible zipper. So all the topics that I did show you guys in the beginning of the video are topics that you will have to cover on your own. I'm just going to show you how everything like comes together. So we're going to put our invisible zipper. I'm first going to start by attaching it to my chiffon fabric. I'm going to attach it to one side, then I'm going to attach it to the other side. So after I had attached my zipper, I noticed that, you know what, I was really not happy with bra cups, so I just decided to remove them. Mine had wiring. I could not find bra cups without wiring, so I just removed them, and then I continued with my project. So now I have my zipper attached onto my chiffon only. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and attach it to my lining. So the exact same process that I used to attach it to my chiffon is just me using the exact same process to now attach it to the lining. So basically my zipper is sandwiched between my lining and my chiffon fabric, so I'm going to stitch it in place. I do recommend that you guys do just do a little YouTube search on how to attach an invisible zipper onto lining, so that this process is going to be easier for you guys if you've never done this before. And remember, for this process, I'm also using the invisible zipper foot that I showed you in the beginning of the video. So I've attached the zipper onto one side. I'm going to go ahead and attach it to the other side, or attach the lining to the other side. Once you get comfortable working with zippers, they become super easy. I know it can be a very scary process, but trust me, it is one of the quickest and easiest things ever. It's even quicker than adding eyelets, and eyelets do not need that much technical, you don't have to be that technically inclined to work with eyelets, but yeah, zippers are much easier. Anyway, so now that I've attached my zipper, I'm going to go ahead and just stitch that center back seam, right? So I'm going to do that to both sides. And then remember the trick that I showed you for attaching your boning? You're just going to repeat the exact same trick, right? So you're just going to go ahead, grab your boning, stitch it onto the excess seam allowance. Then you are going to go ahead and, fold it over and then stitch it in place. So when I'm done with attaching my boning, you're going to see me go ahead. So yeah, I'm going to do the other side. I'm going to quickly trim off the, fraying that's already starting to happen. And then I'm going to attach the boning to the other side. After I've attached the boning to that other side, I'm going to just trim it off, and then I'm going to turn the piece inside out. I want to make sure that all my corners are perfectly turned inside out. And then I'm just going to go ahead and just complete a top stitch over there to secure my boning in place. And so we're basically doing the exact same process that I showed you with all the other boning pieces that we had. So once my boning is in place, remember all I did was originally I just put in my zipper. That center back seam of the skirt is not, you know, stitched. So I think I'm going to move on to that. The reason why I'm saying I think is because I'm watching the video now and I'm narrating everything as I watch the video. So yeah, so I was just checking over here to make sure that everything is lining up and it's stitched properly. So now I'm going ahead and I'm like gonna stitch the center back seam of my skirt. All I'm doing is I'm just putting those two skirt pieces, the chiffon skirt pieces, I'm putting them right sides together, and I'm just gonna go ahead and stitch all the way down. Then of course I will repeat the same process for my lining fabric, the Korean organdy fabric. Then I'm going to go ahead and add my eyelets. However many eyelets you want to add is totally up to you. You're just going to obviously make sure that your eyelets are evenly spaced. I did start off with just adding about 4 eyelets on each side, and then later on, like earlier today, I was like, I'm just going to add 1 more eyelet at the waistline. So this part is totally up to you. In total I did add 5, but you're only going to see me at about 4, I think, over here. So yeah, this part is all about freestyling it and doing whatever feels right to you, or however many eyelets that you want to have. I would definitely say 4 is the minimum you should have, but if you want to do 5 or 6, that would also work. So now we're almost finished with the dress. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and hem my dress, and I do this by first finishing the raw edge of the chiffon fabric, and then I'm going to finish the raw edge of the organdy fabric. I'm going to fold it in about 1 inch. You could do 2 inches, you could do half an inch, whatever feels comfortable to you, but I'm folding it in about 1 inch, and then I'm just going to stitch it down just like that. Then I'm going to obviously press it down with an iron to make sure that everything is nice and crisp. And for this part, please make sure that you are being consistent with the 1 inch that you're folding in. Now this is the part I wanted to show you. As I wore the dress, I noticed that the Korean organdy was just moving weirdly, and it was moving in its own direction, and the chiffon was also moving in its own direction, and I just wanted to make sure that I put everything together. So what I did was, at the waistline seam where I had gathered the pieces, all I did was I just took my Korean organdy, the lining and the chiffon, and I just lined them up at the at the waistline. So that excess seam allowance that we have over there, we're going to stitch everything together. So basically all that I'm doing is I'm just grabbing that excess seam allowance, and then I'm just going to pin everything. And after I've pinned everything together, I'm just going to stitch it down. This is going to make sure that the lining is not moving as I'm walking around, and everything stays in place. So for the final step, I want to make sure that I am stitching my lining in place to make sure that it's again not moving on my bust. So all I'm doing is I'm just doing a couple of stitches from the front of the dress, and I'm just doing those stitches in the seam, like between the seam, just to make sure that I'm catching the lining on the other side, and I'm just stitching them down like that. Now this part is optional, but I would recommend it if you want everything to like stay in place. So yeah, basically you're just going on an already existing seam, and you're just doing like 2 or 3 stitches back and forth, and you are making sure to catch the lining that is on the inside. So that is the end of it, guys. So this is what the dress looks like. Hope that you found this tutorial helpful, and don't forget to subscribe.